the ooze, and some clams came out, and then the clams were hanging around, and they said to themselves, I am not fulfilled. I'm going to acquire the DNA to become a butterfly. And then the clam next to him was like, that sounds like fun, but I am going to acquire the DNA to be an elephant. And then the next one said, I think I shall be a turtle. And on it went until each of them, amoebas, clams, all of those things that had climbed out of the ooze, had rhinoceri, until they had all gone to the DNA library and checked out all of that extra information that they would need to add all of the parts to become all the various creatures that exist today. Until
sounds like a lot of work.
Finally, all of that culminated in Kim Kardashian. And that is panspermia in a clamshell, as it were.
Pookie.
So, I believe that whole push is because there is going to come a time when vehicles are going to show up. And if you think that that's bizarre, you need to think about Ezekiel and wheels within wheels. Because if you truly read that, and actually, if you were to go and read that out of a literal translation of the Septuagint, it clears up. And I know that people have issues with the Septuagint. Feel free to have your issues. I shall feel free to continue to study out of the books that God has taught me out of. But it makes it very clear. Well, no, I don't want to say that. It makes it clear to me that each of these 4 creatures that were moving, that the wheels were, the translation actually says that the word that is generally translated for next to can also be mean under. And I think that if that word does happen to mean under, it appears to be sort of an arbitrary selection, whether you're going to choose next to or under, because there doesn't seem to be in the Greek anything to designate that. And if they were under, then really what's that? That's a hoverboard.
Yeah.
How bizarre is that? Not at all bizarre to us. It's only strange to think of angels with vehicles if you believe human beings to be so bright that we would have come up with something that God had no idea about.
Such as a vehicle.
Right. That, that people just came up with that concept, and that's kind of a weird thing to think, But anyway, so we believe that that these things, these crafts, are going to come, and that they're going to tell us that they are our ancient ancestors, our space brothers. What might they look like? Who knows? There's probably going to be a mix of them. There seems to be in the sightings and in the alien abduction stories, which again, some of you may roll your eyes, but feel free to look up the research of let's see. If you want some seculars, you can look up Dr. Carla Turner, Carla with a K. She's deceased, but she wrote some good books. Or Jacques Vallée. They all. Those are some interesting, and you can some interesting resources. You can look up some research that was done for a conference at MIT by a whole lot of very eminent secular doctors and psychiatrists and various people to explore the alien abduction phenomenon, because it could not be explained in any natural way. And
math magicians.
And so those things are reported, and they are happening, and it's a betrayal to a lot of people in the church to pretend that they're not. But anyway, they report, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic types, and reptilian types, and then the grody little gray ones, who I believe to be like fairies as well. You'll hear like Gary Wayne. He's another great researcher to look up, you guys. Gary Wayne. But he tells a story, and I've actually read it before in some old folk tales. I can post the link to that website sometime. But they were in Scotland. They had some things called the Grey Neighbors. And some of the things that they did were to pick people up in their weird little craft, keep them for a couple of weeks, do odd experiments on them, take samples from them, stuff like that. Sound familiar?
Indeed.
Yeah. So, so who are they gonna? What are they gonna look like? Who knows? I actually lean a bit more toward the reptilian. You see that in a lot of pop culture, which we also believe to be orchestrated in a lot of ways to signal the intent of the prince of this world, who's clearly, I mean, if Christians can't agree with the fact that Satan is the king of Hollywood, then I don't know what they can agree on. But anyway, so a great many of those things are signaled. One of my former favorite shows, one that I am a subject matter expert on, is the show Star Trek Voyager. And in that, you'll find an episode. I can't remember what it's called, but there's an entire episode where the crew of Voyager comes across a race of people called Saurians. And I won't tell you the whole story. You can Google it. That's enough information for you to look up the episode synopsis if you're interested. But in the end, it turns out that these Saurians, reptilian humanoids, were actually from Earth. They were the descendants of dinosaurs that had evolved into sentient beings and built spaceships, left Earth, and then sent pansperm. That wasn't the Voyager term. I don't remember what they called it. Anyway, they had seeded the planet and never come back. And I don't know. Sound a little familiar to you?
Mm-hmm.
So you'll actually see that in a lot of the reptiles. You see them in a lot. You remember V?
Yeah.
From back in the day?
Yeah.
What were my parents thinking letting me watch that? It was horrible.
Came on right after the A-Team, I think.
That
was my favorite.
Yeah.
But,
it was a good show.
Yeah, didn't we try watching that? Well, I say a few years ago, like on Netflix or YouTube or something, just to like kick it old school. And
Yeah.
it was like so weirdly like retro, I guess. That was just the production quality was bunk compared to like today's standards and that kind of thing. The special effects, we were like, this is cheesy. We didn't watch it anymore. Didn't that and but anyway, yeah, I had kind of forgotten about that show, what the premise was, and it's creepy. It was creepy. Visitor or whatever that was. They were like, like a military kind of situation where they came and took over and like planted their own government or whatever.
Yeah,
and,
they rounded up all the scientists and teachers
yeah.
first. Artists too, maybe. I don't mind if they get rid of the artist. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm sure there's a lot of great artists. Art's great these days. I mean, because I want a big picture of soup to hang on my wall.
Yeah, Warhol was a genius.
A genius.
Real genius.
So, anyway, we believe that UFOs are part of the alien deception. And we can segue from that pretty smoothly into the next item, which is the hollow earth. because I think one of the things that you need to do when you're dealing with Satan and his minions is to look in the opposite direction of where they're trying to make you look, and they're trying to make us look up. And I think that there is compelling evidence to look down. And one resource that you can go to for that is Justin Fall, Justin with an E, Faull, on the Fourth Watch. He has a documentary, The Hollow Earth Chronicles, and then he's got a great many podcasts that discuss that. And from there, from listening to those videos, you can follow out, other people that he interviews and mentions, and there's a lot of interesting information on that on YouTube, and you really should follow up on that. I think that there's a distinct connection between, this is something we'll get into at some point, a distinct connection between the Hollow Earth and the research of David Paulides, who wrote the Missing 411 books. Remember, we've talked about them, all of the missing people in national parks.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Yeah. And people go missing, in mountains and in national parks and near water and strange places.
YouTube videos that we watched, were they based
Missing
on
411?
Those were his.
Those were interviews
of
his. There's a lot of interviews of his on YouTube.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So I think that those things are connected in some way. I learned something recently about one of the things that David Paulides, it's Paulides. I'm not sure if I spelled that before, but David Paulides. If you go and look up just a couple of his videos, will give you a couple of his interviews. Will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. And what's going on is that there are huge clusters of missing people in national parks and in various places like that, national and state parks, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. The National Park Service does not search for these people, does not keep a list of them, will not release the case files of most of them under the Freedom of Information Act, and it's all very fishy and bizarre. And there are some target areas that he looks for to decide if a missing person is part of a cluster of the same type of disappearance that he's investigating, or if it's a pretty standard disappearance. And one of them is that people tend to go missing in boulder fields and granite boulder fields. He specifically mentions granite boulder fields. And something that I learned recently is that boron is a necessary component in, or boron has something to do with the opening of wormholes, and that certain types of granite contain high concentrations of boron. And something else that's strange is that people tend to go missing in berry patches while they're berry picking. And I also found that boron is a necessary component in the fertilizer that they use on blueberry patches. Strange coincidence, huh?
Coincidence.
Bisky, tell the folks, do we believe in coincidences?
No,
we don't.
Do not.
So be careful with boron. I wouldn't, I don't know much about boron. I'm going to do some more research on that, but I don't know. Maybe stay away from blueberry patches.
And boulder fields.
And boulder fields.
And granite countertops.
And Yellowstone National Park.
And talking about that, I don't want to get political, but I found, in light of some of these things that we've just talked about, the boron, the national parks, and I found it remarkable the other day when I read the headline about Donald Trump giving those two monuments back in Utah.
Yeah.
The state that were national park, under the umbrella of the national park in some fashion.
It's interesting. We should research that. We should look into that.
But
because, one of the things that we've talked about is what made them choose these exact spots for national parks. What makes this spot eligible and desirable for protection by the federal government and not that spot?
Well,
and perhaps they know something about those spots that the rest of us don't.